Genesis chapter 16, and I wanted to review a passage of scripture that is fairly consistent with what Pastor Dave has been speaking on related to compassion. One of the great needs of society today is compassionate hearts. And one of the things we're going to see within the passage we're looking at today is just how sometimes, we don't take advantage of those opportunities. And those opportunities present themselves in many different ways. And the Old Testament is great to use as an example to show the human element that comes up with situations in life. Offering one of the problems that we have in life are misunderstandings. Misunderstandings, come about from different things. We have a tendency to see just things from our perspective, but not necessarily look at life through someone else's perspective. And that's why we may not identify the opportunities when they present themselves. If we're so focused on us, how are we really going to know what someone else's needs may be? Okay? As you know, life can come at you really fast, and it can cause a lot of things to really hinder us. I know myself, I've had my own experience. We all have our own personal testimony of how God's worked in our life and how God met us when we were at our lowest. One person actually said that, hitting rock bottom is the best place to be, because once you've hit rock bottom, you have a good foundation to build upon. And I know, as I said, I have gone through that where I've hit rock bottom. And at that point, meeting Jesus was a thing that resolved the issues that I had in life. Because a lot of times we think we have it all under control until you're laying down looking up and realizing, I don't have a clue. So, anyway, I'm here to tell you one thing for sure that we can all identify with, is that God does care. And God does want us to care and to use our opportunities to show compassion when the situations present themselves. So, this morning, we're going to review an account in the Old Testament that shows where compassion could have been shown, but we also see how God actually intervenes to show compassion when we choose not to. But I have to tell you something. Reading through the Old Testament is a great adventure. And I have a hard time going in the Old Testament without wandering around and finding other things. It's like you say, what about this? And you keep going, and you start realizing, how did I get over here? I spent a whole hour on something that has nothing to do with what I'm studying. But you get so enthralled with it. It's just like, wow, this is so cool. But one thing that you're going to see in the Old Testament is that there's a lot of drama. There's a lot of human drama. Soap operas, anybody here like soap operas? Those things are still on, aren't they? They're still on. Somebody not, they're still on. I recorded all the, no. Soap operas and all these, dramas and all this, all these TV shows, they're filled with all these elements of drama and people interacting with each other and all this other stuff. I'm going to tell you something right now. They have nothing on the Bible. Nothing. I mean, you'll see situations in the Old Testament that you would not even see, thought of on TV. So, anyway, to give you some background on what we're dealing with in Genesis chapter 16. God had promised Abraham that his descendants would be numerous as the dust of the earth and as the stars of heaven. The problem was that Abraham's wife was barren. It could be a problem. When God says, okay, Abram, come here. Yeah. Look at all the dust on this ground. You see all this, as far as your eye can see, there's dust everywhere. Yes, yeah. Your descendants are going to be like the grains of the sand. Oh, wow. He says, Abram, look at the sky. You see all those stars? Millions and millions of stars, right? He said, yeah. Your descendants are going to be innumerable like those stars. Wow. But then in the back of his mind, he's thinking, but my wife can't have kids. It's funny how sometimes we bring the human element into everything. And even Abraham, who was identified as being the father of our faith, right? Had in the back of his mind, he's still thinking, okay, I believe you, Lord, but how are you going to do this one? Okay? Because keep in mind, he was an old man at this time as well. Well, another character within this little story we're going to be reviewing is Hagar. Hagar, who ends up becoming the mother of Ishmael, is thought to have been given to Abram as a servant on his journey to Egypt, which is referenced in chapter 12. We're not going to go through chapter 12. I just want to give that piece out to you. Because here in chapter 12, we have Abram going to Egypt and meeting with Sarah, and he had that famous line where he tells her, Sarai, see, when we meet Pharaoh, just tell him that you're my sister. You're not my wife, because if you say that you're my wife, they're going to look at you and they're going to see that you're beautiful, and they're going to say, why don't we just kill him and take the woman? So just say that you're my sister, even though they were half-sister. We won't get into that long story. See, there's a lot of tangents you can go on with this. So that's when that occurred. So he said that to Pharaoh. Pharaoh saw her, oh, she's beautiful, took her into her house. All right, I love this one, she's great. And all of a sudden, God visited him and he realized that, okay, this is not a good thing. So he gave him back, says, what are you doing? You trying to trick me? You trying to get me killed? You should have told me this was your wife. So he sends him away with many goods and Hagar. Okay? That's why I bring that into it. So after different things were going on, Abram, all his family, Lot, his nephew, they all travel off north. They're leaving Egypt. And as they go through different things, they have an opportunity where Lot decides he's going to split from the group and go his own little merry way to Sodom. He gets captured. Abram has to rescue him. He runs into Melchizedek. A lot of things going on in his portion. 10 years pass, and that's where we bring us to our passage that we're going to be looking at today. 10 years have gone by and still no child. That's why I want to keep that in mind. So God had made this promise that he was going to have this heir, and then 10 years go by and nothing happened. Now, just think back over 10 years. Okay, where were you 10 years ago? 10 years ago, I can remember watching the Patriots beat up on people because Randy Moss was running all over them. 10 years ago, that's a long time ago when you consider it. So you're waiting for something to happen. For 10 years, it's not happening. People get a little antsy. They start questioning things. Well, this is what happened as well in Abram's family. So we're going to pick it up in Genesis chapter 16, verse 1, where it says, now Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no children, and she had an Egyptian maid whose name was Hagar. So Sarai said to Abram, now behold, the Lord has prevented me from bearing children. Now note with this first, where she identifies that the Lord had prevented her. She's saying that the reason why she's not having any children is because the Lord is preventing her from having children. Not that she's barren, okay? He says, the Lord has prevented me from bearing children. Please go into my maid. Perhaps I can obtain children through her. And Abram listened. Didn't I tell you? So I'm going to try to keep this as PG as possible. Okay? I'm not sure what little children may still be wandering around out here. But Abram listened. Now, man, let me tell you something. If your wife ever comes to you and says something like this, she must have banged her head, because this is not a normal thing. But you have to remember that this is the Eastern culture, and this was something that was normal to them. It was not something that was ordained for Abraham, though. But for the culture's sake, as far as other people looking at him, nobody would have said anything because other people had multiple wives. The point here was that Abram should have been trusting in God. Okay? So, Sarai, with her wonderful idea, I'm going to fix this problem. I'm barren. God stopped me from having a child. It's been 10 years. Abram, here's Hagar. Take my maid to be your wife. She'll be your secondary wife. And maybe I can have a child through her, which was a part of that culture at that time. If Hagar had a child, then Sarai's thinking I can raise the child as my own and therefore fulfill the promise that God has given us. And everything's going to be wonderful, right? So Abram listened to the voice of Sarai, And after Abram had lived 10 years in the land of Canaan, Abram's wife Sarai took Hagar the Egyptian, her maid, and gave her to her husband Abram as his wife. Now this is clearly the impatience of Sarai trying to fulfill the plan of God with her own plan. You know, when we try to do the work of God without the power of God, it's always going to result in frustration and confusion. Now, she thinks she has a grand plan. This is how this is going to work. I get it all lined up. And Abram's sitting there going, yeah, sounds good to me. So, Abram, according to Eastern culture, with this practice, it was acceptable. But for the second time in the Bible, a man listened to his wife when he should have been checking in with God. Right? Isn't that the same thing that happened to Adam? You listen to his wife when he should have been checking with God. So, it may have been that Abram misinterpreted a previous conversation with God. So I'll give him a little bit of, I'll give a little room here. So listen to what it says in Genesis 15. This is the interaction between God and Abram. Genesis 15, 2-4, it says, and Abram said, O Lord God, what will you give me, since I am childless, and the heir of my house is Eliezer of Damascus? And Abram said, since you have given no offspring to me, one born in my house is my heir. Then behold, the word of the Lord came to him, saying, this man will not be your heir, but one who will come from your own body, he shall be your heir. So Abram knows that it's not going to be just someone else in his household, but someone who's going to be from his own body. But it doesn't say Sarai there. So I'll give him a little bit of room. Not much, but a little bit. The problem here is that when we decide to do things based on our own desires, we're going to find ourselves going down the wrong path quickly. One writer put it this way, he says, inordinate desires commonly produce irregular endeavors. If our wishes be not kept in the submission to God's providence, our pursuits will scarcely be kept under the restraints of his precepts. This was from Matthew Henry. I love how he writes that, but I'm going to break it down to you a little bit easier so you to grasp. Pretty much translated, it means this: wrong desires produce wrong outcomes. Okay? Wrong desires will produce wrong outcomes. If you have the wrong desires within your heart and you follow those through to fruition, it's going to have bad outcomes. Our responsibility is to make sure that our desires line up with God. And if we find things going on in our heart that are contrary to Him, the Bible tells us what? To take all thoughts into captivity, doesn't it? Bring them into obedience of Jesus Christ, right? So it's our responsibility to see that thought flying around and go, oh, wait a minute, that doesn't belong in there. Because the longer we allow that to harbor in our heart, it's going to fester. And it's going to affect our soul. And next thing you know, we start making decisions based on bad thinking. Bad thinking results in bad choices. Also, if our wants are not part of God's plan, then our goals will not line up with His word. Simple as that. If what we want is not a part of His plan, then our goals to get there are not going to line up with His word. So one of the things I was thinking about with this is that when you look at situations of this type, so we have Sarai, she's trying to solve the problem by giving Hagar to her husband. We have Abram trying to solve the problem by, well, not trusting God. But what about Hagar? What about Hagar? Now, consider this young girl. I'm not sure, it doesn't state what age she was. I'm sure she wasn't as old as Sarai. Sarai at that time was roughly 75, okay? When she was identified by Pharaoh, she was 65, and Pharaoh thought she was a looker then, okay? So ladies, trust me, there's no excuse, right? All right? And we have some beautiful ladies here as well, so I'm gonna get out of here quick. Tom's my bouncer, watch out. I'm on my own, huh? Okay, moving quite along here. So she was born in Egypt. She becomes a slave to Pharaoh. She's given away to a stranger from another land. She serves faithfully. She does her job. And then she's made to marry her owner, her boss, and have a child. That doesn't sound like a good life. It doesn't sound like things were going the way that maybe she wanted them to go. You know, a lot of times we say, well, that was the culture back then. Yeah, okay, that may have been the culture, but she's a person. And I can imagine not every girl in that situation would sit there and go, yeah, I'll just go along with this. Right? So when you look at Sarai in her position as having authority over Hagar, and the same with Abram, where was the compassion for her response to this? She's just being said, okay, go ahead, you're going to marry him, and you're going to have a baby. Get to it. Where's the compassion there? Where's the concern? Where's the thought that says, let me look at it from her perspective? Do you think that she really wants to be in this situation? It's bad enough that she's a servant, and she can't run away. But now she has to deal with this situation as well. Genesis chapter 16, verse 4 could be the reason why we see this response from Hagar. So he went into Hagar, and she conceived. And when she saw that she had conceived, her mistress was despised in her sight. So now Hagar is looking at the situation going, look at this. All right, so I'm pregnant. My mistress isn't pregnant. And I'm wondering, because it doesn't tell us, I'm wondering some of the things that could have been going on in her head that really prompted the next thing to take place. I mean, she could develop a sense of entitlement, thinking that she was now special because she might bear Abram an heir. She might be thinking, hey, well, God shut up your womb, but he didn't shut up mine. Ain't I special? Right? She might have thought now that Abram would love her and treat her as her wife and not a slave. Maybe she's thinking her position and her status would be elevated because of the circumstances. Or she could have despised Sarai for putting her through the situation to begin with. Look what you've caused now. Or it could be that she thought that she was now favored by God, because in that culture, when someone was barren, it was considered to be a curse by God. And when someone had a child, especially a male child, it was considered to be a blessing of God. So maybe now she thought that even the heavens are blessing me. Who knows? But we see in Genesis 5:6 the response. And Sarai said to Abram, may the wrong done me be upon you. What? I mean, that's like one of those things that, wait a minute, did I miss something here? You know, and poor Abram, he's sitting there going, you gave her to me, and now you're blaming me? Yeah, we have the tendency of doing that sometimes when we take the situations or we make the decisions and there's a bad outcome, let me blame somebody else for this, because it can't be my fault. It must be somebody else's fault that I'm in the circumstance that I'm in. And that's where Sarai was coming from. So he says, may the wrong done to me be upon you. I gave my maid into your arms, but when she saw that she had conceived, I was despised in her sight. May the Lord judge between you and me. But Abram said to Sarai, behold, your maid is in your power. Do to her what is good in your sight. So Sarai treated her harshly, and she fled from her presence. So Sarai now blames Abram, and possibly thinking that he gave Hagar the perspective that she now had the right to respond to Sarai that way. Maybe she could be thinking that, well, you said something to her, and that's why she's treating me like this way, and that's why she's looking at me this way. But isn't it funny how we make these bad choices, and the results of that is nothing that we want to own? Negative responses result when compassion is not given. So the situation we have here is Hagar, who was once faithful servant, is now looking down on her mistress and belittling her. Sarai is beside herself with anger and now blaming Abram and calls on God to judge who is right. Abram cops out of the whole situation. He said, hey, leave me out of this. She's your maid. You do what you want with her. Sarai begins to treat her unfairly. Hagar can't take it, and she leaves. And then something happens. As Hagar leaves, the Lord intervenes. In Genesis 16, beginning with verse 7, it says, "Now the angel of the Lord found her." So here we have Hagar bailing out. I'm out of here. And as it says, she was on her way in a path that it would appear that she was trying to go back to Egypt, trying to find a way home. Can't deal with this situation anymore. I have to get out of here. And we're not going to have time to get into chapter 21, but this is just the first time that she's done this. But we see here, it says, "Now the angel of the Lord found her by a spring of water in the wilderness, by the spring on the way to Shur. He said, 'Hagar, Sarah's maid, where have you come from and where are you going?' And she said, 'I am fleeing from the presence of my mistress Sarai.' Then the angel of the Lord said to her, 'Return to your mistress and submit yourself to her authority.' Moreover, the angel of the Lord said to her, 'I will greatly multiply your descendants, so that they will be too many to count.'" So Hagar receives a promise from the Lord as well. Now, the funny thing is that we don't have a record of anyone asking for the Lord to appear. It's not like she was walking to the Lord and said, "Lord, help me." It's not like Abraham went into his tent and said, "Lord, we need your guidance." The Lord just intervened. And the point that I want to make with that is that even when we lack in showing compassion, God is always compassionate. Even when we miss the opportunities because we're more consumed with life from our own perspective, God is compassionate. I think one of the things that can be difficult for humans sometimes is that we miss things. And then when we're on the other end, when we're the Hagar and no one's showing us compassion, we get that sense of nobody cares. Nobody cares about me. But what we need to build within our own self, within our own soul, is the mindset of knowing that God always does care and that God is always there. And no matter what struggles you may be going through right now, yeah, He knows them. I may not know them. I may not have a conversation with you to get to the point where you tell me, "I'm struggling with this, I'm having a challenge in this area." It may never happen. But you know who knows what's going on? The Lord Himself. He knows your pain. He knows your hurt. He knows your sorrow. And it never misses His mind that something's going on that you need Him for. And He is there. He will intervene even when people don't see past their own stuff to do so. That's how great our God is. I think it's beautiful that His plan doesn't depend on us. You know, a lot of times we think that, yeah, I'm working along God's plan. God can't do nothing without me. You know, I get all these things done for God. I met Jesus back in 1932. And I've been working with Him like this since then, and we've been doing it all together. That's right. Jesus needs me. God doesn't need us. He does His work in spite of us. It is a privilege that we have the ability to partake in His work. It's a privilege. But the mindset should always be that God is there. I could be locked in a room in a closet somewhere and nobody's around me, but God is there. I could be crying my eyes out in my car. Nobody knows, but God's there. He cares. And that's where we should be. So we have Hagar going through the wilderness, trying to find her way home, and God intervenes. Now, the reason why I say God intervenes, and we see here that it says the angel of the Lord, right? That wasn't a slip-up. References to the angel of the Lord is a theological term that they would use as a theophanies or a Christophanies, depending on the situation. A theophanies is how God can interact with mankind so that man's senses can understand Him. okay? A Christophanies would be when it's actually pre-incarnate Christ appearing to mankind. So in this instance, we have the Lord himself appearing to her. And this is not unusual. In Genesis chapter 12, verse 7 and 9, it says, the Lord appeared to Abram. You think that was a typo? No. He said the Lord appeared to Abram on his arrival in the land on the land that God had promised to him and his descendants. In Genesis 18, in this chapter, it talks also that one day Abram had two visitors. Those two visitors were two angels and Jesus himself. In Genesis 32, we see Jacob wrestling, right? And when you see portions of this type, you realize that God doesn't operate the same way that we operate in things. God knows when the right time is. You notice that he didn't go to Sarai and he didn't go to Abram. He went to Hagar. He went to the one that was actually the innocent party in this matter. And he makes a promise to her as well that you will be blessed. And notice also that he calls Hagar Sarai's maid. He tells her to return and to submit to her authority. He reminds her that, look, this is your station in life right now. This is who you are. Go back, submit to her authority, and allow this to be a blessing to you. God demonstrates his compassion by reminding her who she is and where she should be and what she needs to do. But he also tells her what he will do. So how could this have been handled differently? Sarai could have seen that she brought the situation all on herself. Or Sarai could have said, hey, Abram, it's been 10 years. How about we just wait on God some more? What a concept, right? That's one way of handling it. But after she made a mistake, she should have realized that I brought this on myself. This was not Hagar's fault. Abram should have relied on God to fulfill his promise and not listen to his wife. Now, this is not an edict, men, to you not to listen to your wife, because you will be in much pain and sorrow and weep bitter tears. Right, honey? I know how to redeem myself quick. All right. But he should not have listened to what she was saying. He should have been going to God and giving her direction. No, honey, this is what's going on. See, God told me that we was going to have an heir, but he didn't say anything about using anyone else. So I'm just going to go to him and find out what's going on, or I'm just going to wait and trust on God. In order to be compassionate, we must first take our eyes off ourselves. And as the Lord told Hagar, we need to remember who we are. In Colossians 3:12 through 14, it says this: so as those who have been chosen of God, holy and beloved, put on a heart of compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience, bearing with one another and forgiving each other. Whoever has a complaint against everyone, just as the Lord forgave you, so also should you. Beyond all these things, put on love, which is the perfect bond of unity. So we have the closing here in relations to what the Lord continues on in Genesis 16, verses 11 through 15. It says, and the angel of the Lord said to her further, behold, you are with child, and you will bear a son, and you shall call his name Ishmael, because the Lord has given heed to your affliction. He will be a wild donkey of a man. Ain't that the truth? His hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand will be against him. And he will live in the east of all his brothers. Then she called the name of the Lord who spoke with her, you are a God who sees. Remember, this is an Egyptian girl saying, you are a God who sees. For she said, have I even remained alive here after seeing him? Therefore, the well was called Beer-lahai-roi. Behold, it is between Kadesh and Bered. So Hagar bore Abram a son, and Abram called the name of his son, whom Hagar bore him, Ishmael. Their descendants went on to become the Ishmaelites, the Hagarites, Hagarenes, and the Arabians. Yes, his heritage lives on, and he is a wild donkey of a man. As a practical application this week, what I ask you to do is this: look for opportunities to show compassion. Never mind just the circumstance that you're dealing with. Look outside of yourself. Look for others that are going through things to see where you can intervene the way God intervened for Hagar. In today's society, there's plenty of people that have something to say. Everybody's got something to say. There's so many avenues in which we can say it. But what we need is to stop being consumed by the media and the desire to be right and get back to caring about people. People who are lost. People who don't know Jesus. It doesn't matter what their political position is. If they don't know Jesus, they have a destiny in hell awaiting them. That is the biggest issue. I don't care what party they have. I don't care what march they're leading. The issue is, if they don't know Jesus, they're going to perish for eternity. That's the most important thing that we as Christians can be involved with. We need to be there for those people, so as they feel hopeless and hit rock bottom, they have someone there to give them truth. And I'll leave you with this one verse. In Ephesians 5:8, it says, "For you were formerly darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Walk as children of the light." Amen. Can you bow your heads, please?